Welcome to Ms. Evans's European History. Today we'll be discovering the events that transformed England. England's government shifted from powerful medieval kings to a system where Parliament gained more rights and the monarch's power was limited. This gradual change set the stage for a constitutional monarchy. In 1215, King John of England faced a rebellion by powerful nobles angered by his heavy taxes, military failures, and abuses of royal power. As a result, he was forced to accept the Magna Carta, an agreement between the king and his barons. It established that the king was subject to the law, protected certain legal rights, and required him to obtain the consent of leading nobles before imposing some forms of taxation. It also declared that a free man could not be imprisoned or deprived of his property without the lawful judgment of his peers or the law of the land. Although these protections initially applied mainly to nobles and other freemen, their principles were interpreted more broadly over time. As Parliament developed during the 13th and 14th centuries, it gained greater influence because kings needed its approval to raise many taxes. Parliament increasingly agreed to provide money only when the king considered its requests for reforms or new laws. The authority became known as the power of the purse, the ability to limit royal power by controlling taxation and government funding. These developments were significant because they helped establish the principle that royal authority was limited by law and strengthened the development of representative government. Over time, they contributed to the growth of England's constitutional monarchy. If you recall from a previous lecture, Edward VI ruled from 1547 to 1553. He became king at the age of 9. Because he was a child, Protestant advisors governed in his name and continued the transformation of the Church of England into a Protestant church. His reign was brief because he died at age 15. Mary I ruled from 1553 to 1558. She was the eldest surviving daughter of Henry VIII and a devoted Catholic. She attempted to restore Catholicism to England, reunited the English Church with Rome, and ordered the persecution of Protestants who refused to return to Catholicism. Approximately 280 Protestants were executed for heresy, earning her the later nickname Bloody Mary. Elizabeth I ruled from 1558 to 1603. She was Henry VIII's younger daughter and had been raised Protestant. Through the Elizabethan religious settlement, she re-established royal control over the Church of England and created a moderately Protestant national church. Known as the Virgin Queen, she never married and left no direct heir. Her long reign is often called the Elizabethan Golden Age because of England's cultural achievements, overseas exploration, and growing national power, and relative political stability. The Elizabethan bargain is a modern term describing the informal working relationship between Queen Elizabeth I and Parliament. Elizabeth possessed extensive royal authority and controlled areas such as foreign policy, royal appointments, and the management of her court. Parliament passed laws and approved new taxation, giving it influence whenever the Queen needed additional revenue. Elizabeth generally respected Parliament's established privileges while firmly defending her royal prerogative. Parliament also helped enact the Elizabethan religious settlement of 1559. Although Elizabeth attempted to prevent members from debating religious and political matters that she considered the exclusive responsibility of the monarch. This working relationship helped Elizabeth maintain strong royal authority while avoiding the level of conflict with Parliament later experienced by the Stuart monarchs. It contributed to England's gradual development toward constitutional government, although England was not yet a constitutional monarchy. When Elizabeth died without an heir in 1603, the Tudor dynasty ended. James I united the crowns of England and Scotland under one monarch and encouraged learning and culture. One of the most important accomplishments of his reign was authorizing a new English translation of the Bible. Published in 1611, it became known as the King James Bible. However, James had several weaknesses as a ruler. He strongly believed in the divine right of kings, which contributed to disagreements with Parliament over taxation, royal authority, and Parliament's privileges. After dissolving Parliament in 1614, James reportedly complained to the Spanish ambassador.
I am surprised that my ancestors should ever have permitted such an institution to come into existence. I am a stranger and found it here when I arrived, so that I am obliged to put up with what I cannot get rid of.
How do you think members of Parliament would have reacted to James's statement? James also disappointed Puritans by rejecting many of their proposed reforms to the Church of England. Some Protestants distrusted his efforts to improve relations with Catholic Spain, while Catholics were disappointed that he did not grant them greater religious toleration. Some English nobles and political leaders also viewed him with suspicion because he was Scottish and unfamiliar with English political traditions. James I's difficulties, especially his disputes with Parliament over money, religion, and the extent of royal authority, helped set the stage for the more serious conflicts that developed under his son, Charles I. Charles I became king in 1625, succeeding his father, James I. Like his father, Charles believed in the divine right of kings and resisted Parliament's attempts to limit his authority. He and Archbishop William Laud promoted elaborate church ceremonies, religious images, decorated altars, and greater uniformity in worship. These practices upset English Puritans who preferred a simpler and more thoroughly Protestant form of worship. Charles enforced conformity to the Anglican Book of Common Prayer in England. In 1637, he also attempted to introduce a new prayer book modeled on the Anglican version into Presbyterian Scotland. Many English Puritans and Scottish Presbyterians believed these policies appeared too Catholic and threatened Protestantism. The Scottish opposition led to the Bishops' Wars, which eventually forced Charles to recall Parliament and intensified the political crisis leading to the English Civil War. Charles faced serious financial problems because of costly wars against Spain and France. When Parliament refused to approve all the money he requested, Charles dissolved it and raised funds through forced loans, the sale of titles, and ship money, an emergency levy that he controversially extended to inland counties during peacetime. In 1628, Parliament pressured Charles to accept the Petition of Right, which prohibited taxation without Parliament's consent, imprisonment without legal cause, the forced housing of soldiers, and martial law during peacetime. Charles accepted the petition to obtain funds, but soon disregarded its restrictions. Charles dissolved Parliament in 1629 and began his 11-year personal rule. Needing money for war against Scotland, he summoned the Short Parliament in 1640, but dissolved it after 3 weeks when it demanded reforms before approving funds. Military setbacks then forced him to call the Long Parliament, which passed laws limiting royal authority and preventing the king from dissolving Parliament without its consent. Conflicts over taxation, religion, and royal authority eventually led to the English Civil War in 1642. We'll end this part of the story of England's issues with the Stuart monarchs with this focus question. Why did tensions develop between the Stuart monarchs and Parliament?